It's me, Mario!
Mario 64 is timeless. From the very first cutscene, it throws you in the deep end, forcing you to learn the controls at your own pace. You're thrust into the castle courtyard, a space small enough to guide you to the castle, but big enough for you to explore and learn the controls. As soon as you're in the castle, you're pretty much free to do whatever you want, opening up many different playstyles and routes to play this game. This game has remained relevant in pop culture ever since it was released 24 years ago, and there's a good reason for that. Mario 64 isn't just easy to learn, hard to master, it's almost impossible to master. The game draws you in with its simplistic controls, only using 3 buttons and a joystick to move Mario. As you play the game, you try riskier things with Mario, because it's so rewarding to pull off a combo of movements that makes you feel for a second like you've done the impossible and mastered the game. The game is gripping and addicting. Every time that star counter goes up by 1, you feel one step closer to achieving that final goal. The worlds are expansive yet contained. They give you freedom to explore, yet limit it to a restricted area in order to make sure the player doesn't get lost. The game handles progression really well, limiting the amount of stages the player can access at one time. It lets the player explore the castle at their own pace, but sets attainable goals for them to reach so that they can unlock new areas. The reason I want to talk about this subject is because I love this game. It's been a part of my life since I've been into retro games. I grew up on YouTubers like PBG and JonTron who often mention the game. It constantly popped up on top 10 lists, it was used as a point of comparison to other games, and these creators would often mention this game as being one of their favorites. I was a kid, so naturally I wanted to be exactly like my idols. If this game was worth raving about so much, I had to get my hands on it. Unfortunately, I didn't have an N64, but I soon learned that there was a port to the DS. I remember waiting an entire week for that game to arrive in the mail. Every day I anxiously paced around my living room waiting for the mailman to show up, hoping that this would finally be the day that he'd deliver the game. It eventually showed up on my doorstep one day after school, and needless to say, I was overjoyed. I plugged in the game and started my playthrough. Now, at this point, you might be expecting me to talk about how as soon as I played it, I instantly understood why this game was so great, why so many of my favorite content creators loved it, and why it had been so hyped up, but I really didn't. The game was really underwhelming. The controls were clunky, the camera was hard to use, and most of all, the game was too hard for me. I didn't really want to put in the hours to beat it, when in my view I already had better Mario games on my Wii. I got around 40 stars in and messed around with the action replay a little bit, but the game was quickly shelved so I could do another playthrough of Pokemon. I still spent a lot of time on YouTube, watching gaming YouTubers talk about their favorite games, and even a few years later they were raving about Mario 64. I didn't understand. Why didn't I get this game? What was it about this game that people loved so much? Why was I missing out on an experience everyone else got to have? It wasn't frustrating or anything, I just felt left out. A few years passed and I got even more into retro games. I was going to garage sales looking for cheap consoles. I was at Goodwill once a week looking for deals. I started to amass a collection. One of those times I went to a garage sale, there was an N64 for sale with a copy of Mario 64, and even though it was priced higher than the other stuff at the sale, I decided to buy it. When I got home, I hooked the system up and decided to test it out using Mario 64. That classic cutscene played out with the camera navigating the outskirts of the castle, and when I started to wander around the castle grounds, I realized that I was missing out. All of a sudden, it kind of made sense to me. I understood what people loved about the game, and I got to experience that for myself. See, half the reason Mario 64 is so compelling is the controls. The movement options the game gives you are pivotal to enjoying the game properly. The DS version controlled with the D-pad. There was a run button, restricting the player's freedom of movement. It was missing that essential piece to Mario 64. The other half of what makes Mario 64 so compelling is the atmosphere, and the DS version was also missing this. In Nintendo's attempts to modernize the game, they changed small things about the game's atmosphere, which makes the game so enticing in the first place. Mario 64 eases you into its atmosphere. It replicates other Mario games at the time with simple levels. You've got an overworld level that introduces you to the game and the gameplay of star collecting, a snowy mountain level with ice physics and theme-appropriate enemies, an expansive water level where you're free to swim around and collect stars. These themed stages were staples in the series, established in previous 2D Mario games. Presumably, the player will aimlessly wander around the stages they have access to, until collecting 8 stars and being prompted to face the first atmosphere shift. the first Bowser level. This stage is nothing like the previous Bowser levels in other Mario games. I mean, just look at it. It feels dreamlike and kind of ethereal. The backdrop doesn't really resemble anything from the real world. The stage doesn't have a floor or walls, just a series of objects stringed together, possibly to provide difficulty, but also give the player a sense of urgency. The music adds to this as well, utilizing the same sound font that the player is used to, but using it to create a tune that seems completely unfamiliar to any other stage. This is the first time the game reveals this ethereal atmosphere to the player, and it's one of the few times we actually explicitly see it. This feeling has been the target of a lot of Mario conspiracy theories and urban legends. There have been myths about how to unlock other characters, secret levels and stars, secret areas in the castle, and a lot of this can be attributed to this atmosphere the game creates. After the Bowser stage is completed, the basement is unlocked, and for a second the game seemingly relinquishes that pitch shift from the Bowser stage, but from that point on the game is different. Whether you realize it or not, the game's changed for the rest of your playthrough. When you go downstairs, the levels are bleak. They use grays and browns, they have gloomier and harsher sounding soundtracks, and the difficulty of these levels goes up. This contrast makes Mario stand out from the background and the rest of the objects in the levels, as he is usually the most colorful thing in them. These levels feature some tropes from other games, but the developers were distancing themselves from those 2D levels and themes. Then you go to the Bowser level this floor, and to be honest, there's not really a lot to say about this one. It replicates the Bowser levels seen in other Mario games at the time, and even though it has the same music from that first Bowser stage, it kinda kills the atmosphere with its default feeling setting. The game doesn't really return to this atmosphere until you go up to the second floor of the castle, where the most bizarre and experimental stages are found. The upstairs has a feeling that's unique in the game. The stages start to let this atmosphere shine through in the stages like Wet Dry World, which feels drab, unfinished, and almost eerie with its presentation. It helps put forward that dreamlike feeling that the game has to it, even if it does so in a bit of a negative way. Stages like Wet Dry World help contribute to this feeling, but the stages that really indulge in it are up on that final floor of the castle. This entire game you've been striving towards that one goal, striving towards the top of the tower. With each new area of the castle, the atmosphere gets less and less cheery and optimistic and more otherworldly and dreamlike with its stages. They go from sprawling open areas to enclosed spaces where you can see where the world begins and ends. Bright and colorful stages to dark and dreary feeling stages devoid of color. This is by design, of course. The devs really knew what they were doing. They knew how to create that feeling of urgency from the very beginning of the game. That suspense builds and grows seemingly without end until you finally reach This whole game has been building that sense of urgency, that suspense, that feeling that if you don't act soon enough, the princess will be trapped in that castle forever. This feeling finally boils over when you get to the top. Those last two stages feel like the final stretch, the story coming to a close, and yet they feel utterly dreamlike, almost like they aren't real. I mean, look at Rainbow Ride, basically a Bowser stage without the atmosphere of a Bowser stage. The objects are floating in midair, the enemies seem placed not out of logic or reason, but only to create a challenge for the player. Instead of being able to see where the world ends, there is no world. The world ends when you jump off any platform and onto the next. You don't avoid bottomless pits, the entire level is a bottomless pit. I mean, if you change the backdrop and the music, this level feels right at home with the other Bowser levels. Rainbow Ride is somewhat colorful and happy feeling, but it allows that otherworldly feeling to shine through more strongly than in other stages, purely because of the way it was designed. Tick-Tock Clock is the same way. The setting is strange. We're presented with the same questions. Where is Tick-Tock Clock? How did these enemies get here? I was always intrigued by the light pouring out of the bottom of the clock. What's down there? There's a thick coating of fog or light of some sort that appears the closer you get to the top of the clock, which goes unexplained. In the other stages, there's often real-life comparisons to be drawn, but Tick-Tock Clock doesn't resemble any earthly destination. Mario 64 is a game which explains almost nothing to you. It tells you the story, the controls, and that's about it. It assumes you can piece together how the paintings bring Mario to other worlds, why these worlds exist, and what purpose they serve. It assumes you'll either come up with your own reason for why the Bowser stages exist or brush them off. See, this game is so iconic and well known, it's hard to look at it with a questioning eye. But in the wake of recent urban legends, that's exactly what people are doing to this game. And with this eye, when you're looking for this strange feeling atmosphere, you'll find it. And while this atmosphere has been lingering in the background throughout these levels, it doesn't face us head on until these last two levels. These levels build tension throughout the whole game. With every level you've unlocked, you're closer and closer to your final goal. With every star, every level, every door, every new floor to the castle, you feel closer to reaching that final goal, and when you finally do, this tension reaches its paramount. The final level in the game, Bowser 3, is the level in which this atmosphere is most apparent. The level is crafted in a way that exudes that otherworldly energy. There's no real rhyme or reason why objects are placed where they are. They just sort of exist in this plane. The level is difficult, much more difficult than any other of the stages in the game. It feels like a fish out of water compared to the other levels. The dark, gloomy, foreboding theme of the level makes it stand out from the rest of the game. You climb, jump, punch your way up to the very top, and if you finally reach that last pipe, you're met with those few earth-shattering stomps that stare down between the two rivals, the anticipation for what's about to come, and most of all, that organ. This moment is so out of nowhere for this game, yet it's so perfect. It's perfect at representing the culmination of everything the player has accomplished, and when it's all said and done and you finally swing Bowser around and hit the bombs surrounding the arena, then it all disappears. You're brought back to the familiar courtyard you walked your first steps in, where this feeling didn't exist. Everything's returned back to normal, and that dreamlike feeling that invokes uncertainty is replaced with familiarity. There's a lot to talk about pertaining to this game. Recently, people have been writing about, among other things, a deeper meaning to this game. I don't necessarily believe in the personalization or the Wario apparition or anything like this, but I can tell you that I think the media that has come out of this is amazing and really interesting and cool to me. This game means a lot to me, and it's been a cultural icon in the communities I've been a part of for decades. And to me, the thing that makes this game special is that atmosphere, but it took me years to figure that out. That's what makes this game mean so much to me. And even if some of the personalized videos scare the shit out of me, I love the aesthetic of them and the idea of something deeper to this game. I don't think that this atmospheric feeling is unique to me. I've seen threads on social media talking about similar feelings people have had while playing the game, and I've talked to friends who feel the same way. Mario 64 is definitely unique to other Mario games. It's one of the few games where Mario's alone. There's no Luigi, no Flood, no Luma, no Cappy. He's by himself, and maybe that feeling of being alone has to do with it. I really love this game, and I think it's a must-play for anyone young or old, and of course nowadays it's easier to play than ever. It's really an amazing experience start to finish, and there's a reason that it's so well regarded in pop culture. If you've watched this video up to this point, maybe it's time to replay this game again, or maybe try it out for the first time in a while, or maybe even play it for the first time. Maybe you'll have a different experience than me. Maybe you'll find something that has gone unnoticed by the community. A lot of this game is pretty up for interpretation, and there's obviously still a lot that's yet to be discovered.